state financial aid. We call it the MASFA. And note that this focuses on the current application for 23-24, but we do hope to bring training to you when we unveil the 24-25 application, which will be after. All of those issues are done with the federal FAFSA. I cannot see each of you or get the opportunity to meet you individually, but it's good to have you here. And as Tracy said, the session will be recorded and will be available to you, but you can also contact the office for further assistance. We've had two people from our office to lead this project, Robert Brunn, the Senior Associate Commissioner, and Stephanie Barboza, our Assistant Director, and they are basically our resident experts, and they're both on this session. So I'll let Robert or Stephanie add any other comments, but just want to thank you for being here this afternoon. And thanks to Regents for making this training possible.
Robert, you're on mute.
Thank you. Clantha, no, I have nothing else to add except to welcome everyone and say good afternoon.
All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Tracy Cox, and I'm a senior functional analyst here at Regent Education, and we are providing our product Regent Access, which houses the Massachusetts state aid application. And so when you hear me reference Regent Access, that's pretty much the MASFA that I'm talking about. Just a couple of housekeeping items. This is a very interactive type training. I ask that you utilize the chat for questions or raise your hand. If you have a question, just put it in the chat, and I will pause throughout the presentation to address questions. Today's training is more so geared towards folks at the high schools that may be helping students complete the application. And so I'll be going into slides and showing you hands-on how students will be entering the actual application, going through some questions, and then I'll do kind of a high-level overview of talking through what happens once the student completes the application, how that information gets transmitted over so the state can actually use it to award students. But I will not be going into the details of what the state and the school, the college staff sees, because from the perspective of a person helping a high school student, you wouldn't have access to that side anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Let's do this. Okay. So just a small agenda. So welcome and introductions. We've done that. Understanding the student experience. So when I say student experience, that means the portal that the student actually gets to where they can sign up and complete the application. Next, we'll talk about completing the application. And then also I'm going to talk about corrections, because sometimes, students can send in some information and they say, oh, I made a mistake, I need to correct that information, or the school can make corrections on behalf of the student. And then I'll go over any communications associated with this entire process. Okay. Do we have a question? Okay. All right. So first of all, what is Regent Access? Well, Regent Access is basically the Massachusetts state aid application. And with this application, it's in the form of what we call a smart form. So it's more of a interactive type form that the student fills out electronically on the portal. It has a series of dynamic questions. So it basically understands that, hey, just as an example, if I put in that I will not file taxes, then it's not going to ask what type of tax form did you file, versus if I say, yep, I filed taxes, then it will ask. So it has that dynamic logic in it to understand what questions to ask each individual student. Having the smart form available allows the student to be self-sufficient in completing their application. And one thing I want to point out is this application mimics the questions on the FAFSA. So today we will be going through 23, 24, but for 24, 25, one of the major changes is EFC now is SAI. So, and then there are a lot of different questions on the FAFSA for 24, 25. So all of that is being updated for that 8-year. And then the output of it comes through like an ICER. So that output, just like the FAFSA, we have a form of the ICER that we provide to the state and the schools. And it supports independent versus dependent students. There is a student and parent e-signature option. There's a printable PDF that is provided to students at the end of their application process. And then the student will be made aware of their EFC or SAI. So, creating a portal account. So let me just say this. The state will place a URL either on the state's website or the school's website, and the student can go and click on that link. Once they click on the link, they'll get a screen, and I'll show it, that basically has the state's logo on it, and it allows them to sign up for a portal account. They are required to sign up in order to complete the application. So when they click on the link, they're going to get to a page that shows this box. And at the bottom of the page, they'll click sign up. Once they click sign up, they are presented with a question of eligibility. Hey, do you fall into any of these categories? Because what we're trying to find out is, should they be completing the FAFSA or should they be completing the MASFA? And so if the student answers yes to this preliminary question, then they are directed to go to the FAFSA website and fill it out. Versus if they answer no, then they're presented with an option to click continue. And once they click continue, they are allowed to move forward in creating their portal account. So just here you can see this is basically a question geared towards citizenship. Because if they're a U.S. citizen, then they need to complete the FAFSA. So once they click continue, they're asked, just simple information, email address. They need to create a password and confirm that they're not a robot. Once they put that information in and click continue, they'll receive a message that says, go check your email, and they'll receive an email from the system saying, hey, click here to authenticate your email account. And then once they click there, then they're brought back into the actual portal to complete the sign up process, where they have to provide first name, last name. When we go into an actual student, all of these questions aren't required, because a lot of students that will be using the MASFA, they don't have a social security number, but we'll talk about that a little later. So let me go back. So once they've completed that and click done, they will be brought into the portal. And so when they come into the portal, they'll hit a page that looks like this that's called the dashboard. And the dashboard houses information about, what's needed from the student. If the state opts to post here helpful links that a student can click on to get more information, that'll be here. It usually has some sort of introductory messaging to the student. And then also things that are needed from the student. On the left-hand side, they'll have a little red bubble, which means it's something for the student to complete. But you can also see in the middle of the screen, here it says documents, and it has a red bubble and it shows needed. So if the student has an application that they need to complete, it's going to show here. Just to understand this, when a student's portal account is created, this document / application populates automatically. There is no, the student has to do something. Once they're in here, they're going to see it. And if they don't complete the application when they first log in, and then they go, they log out and they come back later, it's still going to show, hey, you still need to do this. Okay. So now, let me go back. So if as a student, I click on this financial aid application here, it will bring me into it where I can get a little more information about it. And then I can actually click review and update or start it. And so I'm in the I'll call it the document screen. And so there's more language that's provided, and then they can actually click into the application. And so they can start, edit, or complete the form. So they would click on that. So, okay, so I want to talk about student statuses. So remember I said, if a student comes in and then they don't complete it, or they enter the application and they complete it and they don't sign it, or it's pending a parent signature, there's a bunch of different statuses that will be associated to this that the student will see when they log into the portal. And so these are all of the statuses that a student could see. So it could be that they didn't start it, in progress, it's pending a student signature, it's pending a parent signature, just needed and complete, submitted. If they complete it, sign it, it has everything in order, it'll flip to satisfied. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. So if you're helping a student and they log into their application and it says, in progress, that basically means they didn't complete it. So you can advise them, hey, you need to finish completing the form and sign it for it to be submitted. So complete an application. So again, they must be logged into the portal to even get access to the application. Also, the language on the questions, it's both in English and Spanish. And then as we go through the application, you're going to see a bunch of little information bubbles that just provides a more detailed explanation of each question. So it was kind of tailored to give more information in case a student doesn't really understand what the question is asking. And that's also provided in English and Spanish. Also, there are certain fields in the application that are required, and those are notated with an asterisk. If it's not required, then the student can just skip over it. Okay, so I'm gonna click that. So this is just an example. And again, I'm gonna go into an actual student and we'll walk through it. So once the student enters the application, this is what the first page looks like. And so you see here on the left, there's different sections. These sections are based on sections on the FAFSA. And as a student navigates through, they could actually click forward. Like if they wanted to start with household information, they could click there, but they will not be able to submit this application until they go through each of the screens. So they could just click through that way, or they could click next on each screen. Once they get through the entire application, they're given the option to e-sign. Well, they're given two options. E-signature, is the recommended approach. And I say that because if they opt to paper sign it, then that means they have to download this application, sign it, and then re-upload it back into the portal. And then someone at the state has to actually look at that document and approve it before their application is seen as fully complete. So it's a little more cumbersome if they opt to do a wet signature. So we want to encourage e-signature at all costs. Also, students will be given the option to e-sign, as well as parents if they are a dependent student. And I'll talk about the parent process in a moment. And so, yeah, just remember e-signature is the way to go, if at all possible. Okay, this is talking about, so yeah, an independent student has the option to either e-sign or paper sign. A dependent student, both the student and the parent have the option to e-sign or paper sign. But again, if one of them paper signs, then the process, it'll delay the process of their application being deemed fully complete. So this is the screen where we have the e-signature option. So you see it says e-sign document or choose another option. The other option is paper signature. So they come here, they'll click on e-sign. And so they have to, when they click on it, they have to put in their first name, their last name, the password that they use to set up this portal account. And then also they are required to download the PDF before they can e-sign. And that PDF basically is a printout of all of the questions that they answered with their entries, as well as it has their calculated EFC at the bottom. And so here you see it has the financial aid application and this little download button. They have to do that. If they try to click forward without doing that, it's going to stop them. They're going to get an error and they can't continue forward. And so this is the actual e-signature page. I said they have to enter their first, last name, password, and then they click sign. Okay, so let me go back. Let me go back. So if we have a dependent student, once the student e-signs it, they'll be brought back to that dashboard page. And then now their application will say pending parent signature. And then if they click into it, it'll be a box there that says request parent signature. And so when they click on that, you can see in the background here, it says request parent signature. What'll happen is a separate box will pop up and it'll have, if they listed one parent on that in the application or they listed both, it's going to have the parents listed there and they can select which parent. And then if they put an email in the application process, it will auto populate. And then they send the invitation. What happens at that point, the parent does get an email, and in that email, they will be required to set up a portal account. And then once they do that, they will be brought into the application so they can review the information that the student did put in. And this was a question that came up on the other training. The parents are allowed at that time to make updates to the information that the student entered. And then they can make updates or add additional information. And then they will be prompted to e-sign or paper sign the application. Once they submit their e-signature, then if both the parent and the student signed it, an e-signature is considered complete. Was there a question? Okay, I'll keep going. So I know that was a lot. That was just kind of a high-level overview. And again, we're going to create an account for a student and walk through the actual application. But I want to pause to see if there are any questions at this point. Okay. All right. I'm going to keep going. So let's talk a little bit about corrections. So if the student later decides, you know what, I made a mistake, I need to make a correction, then the student themselves can go back into the portal and they will have the option to correct a previously submitted application. And it'll be a button that they can click on, and then they can just go through that process and e-sign it again. Or the school/state, if the ICER has been created within the Regent interface, they can also process corrections on that side. And so if a correction is processed, when a student later comes into their application, they'll see that, oh, now I have two documents, meaning this was for the first application and the second one is for what I updated. They'll have that. Okay. So with communications in this process, there's a few communications associated. Of course, there are emails related to creating your portal account. So remember I said when they sign up, they get an email. There's an email. So when they sign up, there's an email for the parent and the student. There's the email to request a parent signature. There's an email that said, yes, your account has been created. If they need to reset their password, there's an email associated to that. And then once a student successfully completes an application, they get an email that says your application has been submitted, and it also indicates this is your EFC. Okay, so that was it for the slide. So let me actually go into it. So again, remember I said they're going to get a link. The students will get a link that they can click on. And when they click on that link, they will be directed to this page here. And so as a new student, okay, we have a question. Mario, you have a question?
Yes, just a quick clarifying question. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, great, thank you. I know you said there's an option for like a printout of the application, but for those who do fill out the application online, will they at the end get a full filled out version of the application that they could print and have a copy of?
Yes, so before they're able to sign it, they have to download the printout. And it has all of the questions on it and all of their entries on it. Yes, they're required to download it. And then if they have the download, then they can print it.
Great, thank you so much.
Any other questions? Similar to the FAFSA, will there be a tracker for MASFA? Rose, can you expand on what you mean by tracker? Or if you want to come off mute and explain it.
In Edwin, we are able to track which students have completed the FAFSA, incomplete, or information needed, or whatever. Would there be something similar for the MAFSA?
The state will be provided with an export of their applications, and it has statuses on it. Excuse me. And so they can track at the state level what's going on with their applications.
Yeah, Tracy, let me follow up your response to Rose with this work we currently undergoing. We are currently reviewing all the applications that have been submitted and really going through a triage process to figure out who needs what information. We know there's some follow-up that's going to be needed. So we'll be following up with each applicant individually. So we'll do that ourselves.
And Robert, is it also safe to say that once these students are approved, that we can include their completion status with the Edwin data, but we'd have to get that over there, and Ken Cloud's on this call. But I think we should be able to move the completion status along with the FAFSA data to include those students so that the counselors would know that they've completed the MASFA and they have a current application. And I don't know if you were responding to that aspect of it, how that gets over there.
Yeah, I did hear the reference made by Rose
Mhm.
about Edwin.
Right.
This is going to require some internal conversation, Clintha. The way the iShare record transaction comes in is a little different than FAFSA, so we'll have to kind of think about that. But that's an option we'll have to consider.
Sure, and probably would be an ultimate goal to show status in one place, but we have to work on that, is what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah, the other part too, Rose and others, is that we are doing this for 23, 24, and the options are somewhat limited. And we don't even know right now if these students are actually in high school, or I assume if they're in high school, they'll be doing a 24, 25 application, which we've not presented yet. So I think these would be students that are out of high school right now that perhaps are looking to enroll during a spring semester or something else. So, but I think when we begin 24, 25 processing, what you are suggesting here will have value for guidance community.
Okay, do we know when the 24-25 application might be available? From the Regent perspective, it is already available. However, we have to work with the state and show, train with them on it, and then they'll let us know when it can be released in the production environment. Mm-hmm. Mario, did you have another question?
Yeah, I had one more question.
Okay.
For now, which is around the documents portion of the application. My understanding is that for students to qualify for the in-state tuition portion of tuition equity, that it's the colleges that will collect the actual documents to classify them as like a high school completer, and so they won't need to resubmit that documents as part of the state aid application. Is that correct?
Clintha, I can take that question as well. I think what's being referred to here is the affidavit form that each student will need to complete to verify their eligibility for in-state tuition and by extension, this state financial aid programs. So that is correct. Once the school collects that, then there's no need on the part of the student to redo this form, the affidavit, for the purpose of financial aid.
Okay, and as a follow-up to that, so when it comes to, I know you said this hasn't been released yet for the 2024-2025, but when that does get released for high school seniors, they're not going to yet be enrolled in a college to have submitted that documentation ahead of time to be classified as a high school completer. And so will they be able to fill out this online state alternative, or will they have to wait to be enrolled in a college to then submit those documents and be classified as a high school completer before doing this?
If you're talking about the affidavit form, they'll have to wait until they actually enroll in college to complete that.
But no, he's talking about whether they can complete the MASFA form. I think they can be done independently, but before the student is able to be awarded and access state financial aid, that affidavit has to be completed and the student approved as eligible. So much like, and the way I like to view this is students apply now for admissions. They've not completed college and their transcript is in process for the year, and they'll get admitted, but with the condition of providing a final transcript. So the affidavit then, I'm not sure where the schools will place that in that admissions process, but let's say the MASFA is available mid-March, and the students probably just completing their admissions application. There isn't anything to prevent that student from completing the state financial aid application, but the institution will not be able to act on that until the affidavit is in place. And however that takes place. I think, Robert, as I'm listening to the question, it was Must they wait to complete the MASFA until the affidavit is complete?
I'm thinking these, the two forms are independent of each other, right? So they can do a MASFA application at this point now, but that's just a form they complete very much like the FAFSA, but when they arrive on campus, they'll have to complete the affidavit form to, as part of qualifying for in-state tuition. And that same affidavit form, once completed at the school, would also give them access to our
Yes,
state financial
yes,
programs.
and I think that's what I was trying to describe. So thanks for that clarification.
Thank you.
Any additional questions at this point?
There
Okay.
is one from
Yeah.
Ariella.
Yes.
Hi, kind of just to add on to that, I was just wondering with the MASFA, would students be able to receive award letters based off of that application, like that process? Because usually when you do your FAFSA, schools are able to give you more scholarships and things like that. So I was kind of just wondering if that would kind of substitute and they'd be able to give you information based off of that application.
Well, we're hopeful that schools will similarly use the MASFA application for their own institutional aid, right? But for state aid, at least, we would be notifying the students of their eligibility. We are, in fact, in the process of building a platform where we are going to transfer this MASFA data and determine students' applicants' eligibility for our state financial aid programs, at least the ones that we are in control of. We call them centralized. These programs are internal to our system. And then there are others that are where we allocate funds to institutions for which the students will also qualify. So there'll be a coordination between the Department of Education and schools to make sure that these students are getting access to state aid. But I suspect that the MASFA form is what would also give them the opportunity to consider those students for institutional dollars, since that's the only form they can complete.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay. All right. So now we're at the screen
There's
where
a
the
question, Tracy.
oh, I'm
There's
sorry,
Susan
Susan.
Butler. Yeah.
Hi, yes, so I just so I understand, a current senior then would have to make a commitment and be enrolled in a school before they know if they would be getting the Mass state tuition, because in order to sign the affidavit, they would have to be enrolled in the school. Is that, I'm not sure how they can make that commitment if they don't know if they're getting the in-state tuition or not.
I think we want to take a stab at that.
So I think when students apply for admissions, they apply to multiple schools. And they would probably complete this affidavit if it is a public college or university. They'll complete an affidavit at every school and make their decisions on whatever that date is. It's usually somewhere around May 1st. They're not having to fully commit. They commit when they pay that deposit. But I think the student wants to get themselves in a position where they can be awarded, get a financial aid award. They've done everything that they need to do, and then they make their choices based on the financial aid that they're getting and other things that they consider. So this is not to direct the student to one specific school or say you can only do this at one school. Just consider this application very similar to the FAFSA, to what happens when the student completes the FAFSA. The only thing is access to state financial aid is a result of the tuition equity law, which allows these students to receive some assistance. They're not going to get federal funds, but they will be permitted to get state funds. And the affidavit then will allow the institution to make decisions if at the time that that student has been admitted completed that affidavit, the institution also sees that that student has that MASFA on file, the alternative application.
So
So
it
you
is,
took-
it's admitted to the school then, not enrolled.
Well,
Is,
now that's a very technical term, and there was something that I'm thinking about a case that we had at one point where a judge ruled that at enrolled meant that the student was admitted. But in our terminology, we say admitted, and the student actually isn't enrolled until they've selected the classes and then shown up on day one. That to me is enrollment, but admissions, it's the same process. So when do you consider the student admitted? Students
well,
who are
because
completing
so for the
regular
FAFSA, it's like once they're admitted, that's fine, then they can make a decision. So if they can sign this affidavit once they've been admitted, that's fine, because then they can still make a decision based on that before the May 1. If they have to be enrolled to sign the affidavit,
No,
they're not
they
going
do
to know
not have
what
to
they.
be, right. They do not have to be enrolled to sign the
Okay.
affidavit. In fact, the affidavit determines whether that student will pay in-state or out-of-state tuition. So they want to do that affidavit right up front so that they're given the benefit of being assessed in-state tuition. That's the whole point of the affidavit.
Okay, perfect. So
Okay.
it's enrolled. That really was my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, well, sometimes, as we're talking, we may say enrolled or whatever, but I think if you consider this process no different than the process that students are currently going through, it's just that the affidavit will facilitate a decision by the campus as to whether they're going to charge that student in-state or out-of-state tuition. And if they are charged in-state tuition based on that affidavit, then the institution can then view the cachet of state financial aid that they control and award that. And as Robert said, the centralized programs that we control, we will also notify the student of their eligibility, very similar to what we do with Mass Grant, let's say, for example.
There may be a follow-up question from Rose, but just before that, let me also add that the affidavit form will follow the students wherever they go. So if they attend public institutions or a private institution, they have to complete that form to access state financial aid programs.
And Robert, by that, you mean that the student completes that at every institution, because the institutions aren't going to share that, right? Each institution makes the decision on the in-state, out-of-state tuition.
That's right.
My follow-up was so I know, for example, for the FAFSA, when a student is admitted, in that admission letter or a follow-up letter, the school will let them know that they need to apply for FAFSA. So are the schools going to do the same thing based on how the students complete their application and they know they are undocumented to tell them that they need to complete that form, the MAFSA?
I would assume that the institutions will adapt their communications to the student to make certain that they can take advantage of the resources that are available. Our institutions have their own processes, and the Department of Higher Ed does not govern those processes. We can suggest, but institutions compete for students. And so they're going to want those students to enroll on their campus. So I think they'll do whatever they can to help students gain access to resources that they have or that the state has made available. So I would expect that if they know that they are admitting a non-US citizen based on that affidavit, there probably is likely to be some follow-up information to say, make sure you do this, this, or that. I don't know if the affidavit includes a link for the MASFA, but I think we will release an updated version later this spring. And I think that will include a link so students will know where to go to complete the application.
Thank you.
Tracy, there might be one or two comments in the chat, and I don't know if you want to take time to address them now or later, but
yeah, I mean, there are questions more so for the state. This one says, So it sounds like the schools are aware they should make determinations on the affidavit process when students are admitted and not wait until they are enrolled. I believe that was addressed, correct?
Yes, and that is correct.
Okay. And then the other one says, doesn't it also say they will register with selective service within 120 days of being eligible to register?
I can continue on, Robert. You can add if I missed something. It does say that, but that is because that was included in the legislation. So although we know selective service is no longer part of the FAFSA, we had to include the language on this affidavit based on what the legislature invited. And we are working, our legal team's working to get the legislature to remove that. Hopefully that might happen when the second release of the affidavit is printed later this spring. So that's a process that's being handled by the legal team, but we were or are obligated to follow the law, and that's why that's there.
Okay. Any additional questions at this point?
And by the way, these are good questions, and I'm glad that we're taking time to answer because we want you to be equipped to help students. So this is really good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So when the student clicks on the link to access the portal, they'll come to this page. And if I'm a student, I have never created a portal account, I click sign up. So here is the registration eligibility question. It's asking about their citizenship. If I say yes, then it tells me I'm not eligible. Since you are eligible to file a FAFSA, go complete a FAFSA. If I say no, then I'm allowed to continue. So it's going to ask me to put in my email address. Click continue. So here, please validate your email. We send a confirmation email to your account. So let me open up my email. So this is the email that I received. Here's the link to verify your email address. I click on that link. Put it up here. And so I get this. Thank you for validating your account. Please select continue to log in and complete the final step of account registration. Click continue. So now I sign in with that email and password that I just created. And so now I have to put in my information, and it asks for my first and last name only. I'll do Pear. I'm going to do Tracy Pear today. And I click done. Okay. So now I'm in. I've signed in. So if you notice, there's 2 applications pending. At this time of year, a student, once we put the 24-25 live in your production environment, at this time of year, the student would get both until we expire 23-24. And so just as I showed you on the slides, we're on the dashboard page. So it shows, hey, you have 2 items that are outstanding. Also, there is some introductory language at the top there that is expandable. And so I can just go over here and click on my documents. Or from the dashboard, I could just click directly into the one document that I need to look at. So we're going to click into that. You notice it shows a status of needed. And now that I've clicked into it, it says not started. I haven't started it. But then it gives me the option to start, edit, or complete the form. And then there's a welcome message at the top. So I'm going to click here. And it's going to open the application up for me. So now I'm in application. It pre-populated my name. When I go through the corrections process, it will pre-populate everything from the prior application. So right now it's populating what it knows, and at this point it knows the student's name. You see here how there's this red star. Those are required fields. If it's no star, it's not required. So I'm going to say single. And I'm going to do, let's see, do independent. So I can say Illinois for my driver's license. So if I put no license, it doesn't ask for a state. If I put I have a state license, it's gonna ask for the number. So I'll put that number in. Social security number, that's not required. If you have undocumented students filling this out, for the most part, they wouldn't have a social security number. So they are allowed to leave that blank. Address is required. State of residence. Did I become a full-time resident of this state? If I say no, then it's going to ask, well, when did you become a full-time resident? If I say yes, it's not going to ask that. A phone number is not required. It pre-populates this email with the one that you use to create this account. Okay, let me go back. The question. I'm not sure what a DACA number is. I'm assuming if a person has one, they know, but I'm really not sure what that is. I will have to look it up. So this takes a DACA, ITIN number, or SSN. Okay, high school information. If I say I have a high school, it's going to ask for the name of the high school. If I say I don't have a GED, it's not going to ask for anything. This is required. I'm pursuing a bachelor's degree. And I'll say, no, I don't have a bachelor's degree. Number of households. Since I'm a single independent student, I'll do a dependent student example too. So 1 and 1 is fine. Now my income information. So if I say will not file, it puts everything away. If I say will file, now I have to answer all of this. So I'll say single. I did a 1040. I don't know about a Schedule 1 and my tax, my AGI, and how much I paid in taxes. And those numbers are in that drop down because that's what I've used before. So with a student, those won't pop up. Income earned from work, I'm going to do 35,000. I am not a dislocated worker. So I'll put no, but it does explain what that means. This is asking about federal benefit programs. If I say yes, Then it's going to ask, did I receive a Medicaid or SSI? Did I receive this one? I'll put no and no. I'll put yeah on that. Click next. So these are all other items that are asked on the FAFSA. We'll leave those blank. Pension, IRA payments, child support received. Yeah. Other untaxed income, other monies not reported. So this is the school list. So I'm going to go ahead and select my schools. Now they can select, that's a question. How many schools can a student select? I believe it's 20 do off campus, but if I wanted to select 2, and then another one will pop up and I can just keep going. But for now, just select 2. Click next. So now that I've gone through the application, now I'm at the point where I can e-sign it. So I'm going to e-sign. So remember I said it requires you. So if I click next, it's going to say select the icon form and download and view the form before you e-sign it. So they cannot e-sign it without downloading it. So let me download and we'll take a look at it. Okay, here's the download. So this is the actual form. Rose, the 24-25 form will mimic whatever's on the FAFSA. So no housing questions. Mm-hmm. So these are all the questions that were asked of the student and their entries. Okay, is it Katia? You have a question?
Yes, I do. I just want to build off of that on the 24-25 FAFSA. It's significantly different. So there will be none of those income questions.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
So how will you guys get the income? Is it going to be like a tax, a consent and approval similar to the FAFSA built in, or?
I'll have to look into that. I mean, I know we're training the state on 24-25 next week, so we'll be able to kind of look into it to see how it's been designed.
Okay.
Yeah, right now, Carol, it's just English and Spanish. There has been a request for additional languages, but I'm not sure where that is on our internal roadmap. Okay. So you can see here the questions and then what they entered, and it's several pages. But what I want to show you on the last page is it shows the EFC there. And then once this is submitted, the student also gets an email that shows the EFC. And so now that I've downloaded that, I can click next, and this is the e-signature page. I'm looking at this question in the chat. That's up to the state to determine if the student qualifies or not once they complete the application. This is mimicking the FAFSA, so we allow the student to select whatever state they're from.
Just as a follow-up, Trace, to that question. So this is for data that will be migrating to the new platform we're building. And this is where determination of eligibility will take place. As is true right now under our current system, we bring the FAFSA data in, then we look at all the fields and their values, and those we use to confirm whether or not someone meets mass residency requirement, so on and so forth. So it's just the data we're looking at right now. We're not determining anything. So a student can report themselves as a resident of Illinois, although in our process, if they are a resident of Illinois, we will not get their application under our current system. But we'll take this data in, and if they were to report that, we'll take it in and then have certain rules in place to disqualify them for state financial aid programs.
And Robert, can I piggyback on that also to say with the affidavit, we have to remember that the student has to attest to the fact that they completed 3 years of high school at a Massachusetts high school and received a diploma. So that might be the stop point right there. Even if the application, the MASFA, is completed, if the institution is not able to provide in-state tuition to that student because of how they answered the affidavit, then they're simply not going to be able to qualify for state aid. And as well as OSFA also finding those students as well with the information as you suggested. But I just wanted to point back to that affidavit, which is critical with the access for state aid.
Yeah, although the student may not, they could be attending private institutions where the, again, which would be a little different, but they may not be a tuition equity acknowledgement at a private campus, but certainly the affidavit form has to be completed in order to access financial aid that can be portable to both public and private institutions.
That's correct. I was just responding to the Illinois residency component of that. So yes.
Right.
Okay. So after oh, I'm sorry. There's a question. It says, then ask them if they are resident of MA, if they must attend MA high school for 3 years. Why ask? So is it, why ask them if they are a resident of MA, if they must attend a MA high school for 3 years?
Yes, that was the question.
Yeah, Clint, I think that one's is for either you or myself. I have some initially that. Do you have any response to that, Clint?
If I'm understanding the question, why ask if you attended a Massachusetts high school? That's on the affidavit. That's not on the financial aid application. And very similar to the FAFSA, any student can complete that fully intending to enroll in a Massachusetts public college and receive in-state tuition or access state financial aid, but may be restricted based on their residency, which, as Robert mentioned, we do look at edits across the application to determine if that student meets residency. So the question about high school participation is part of the tuition equity law. And that's just not something you're going to be able to get around, but we're not bringing those questions over to this financial aid application. I don't think there's a need to do that because the institutions determine the tuition rate for students based on information that they are also collecting. So if that student completes an admissions application, list Illinois as their permanent resident, and submits an Illinois transcript, I think that student's going to be charged out-of-state tuition, right? Regardless of whether they complete that affidavit, which they will then say, I did not attend a Massachusetts school. Keep in mind that the institutions will also collect the student's high school transcript as further verification of their status.
Any other questions? Okay. So since we've e-signed that, so now when you e-sign, it takes you back to the dashboard and you can see that this shows satisfied. That means successfully completed, e-signed, it's done. Now, while we're here, let's just say, you know, I log out, okay, it's done. And then tomorrow I say, oh, shoot, I need to make a correction. I can log right back in here and select the one that I know I submitted, click on review and update, and now I can edit the completed form. If I click into that, it's going to bring up the application and it's going to have everything pre-populated in it that I put before. And so let's just say I wanted to add another school. So I would go to the end. Here, I probably can just click there. And then I'll add another school. I click next. And next. Okay, next. Next. And so as I'm clicking through, you know, I can look at everything and review it and make sure that that's all correct and that the only thing I wanted to do was add another school. Get to that page. And so there's my third school and I click next. Then I'll be prompted again to sign this. I must download it. Downloading. Is there an option to indicate homeschooling? I believe so. 1 second. Let me go back. It has whatever options are on the FAFSA. Yep, homeschooling is there.
Tracy, I just want to follow up with a question to the person who asked that question. Was that question geared towards this MASFA application itself, or were you thinking perhaps about the affidavit form where it says you have to have attended high school for 3 years and graduated from one? Is that perhaps what's more applicable? Or because frankly, we're not going to be looking at homeschooling versus attending a public or private high school in determining a student eligibility for financial aid. On the other hand, the affidavit form speaks to having attended a high school in Massachusetts for 3 years and graduated from one. So I'm wondering if that's question might have been applied to that part of it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was just following up because I think I had heard that for tuition equity purposes, homeschooling would count, and so you know, whether it was for the in-state tuition portion or the state aid, and I saw it like quickly on the drop down that it had several options. So I was wondering if that was one of the options there. So that clarified
Mm-hmm. So now I processed the correction and did the e-signature. So now when I get back to the dashboard, I have multiples for the 23-24 year. Now, something to understand, once this information has been transmitted over to the state, they have to run a process to create the actual ICER. So if the ICER has already been created, when the student logs in, they'll see something that says transaction ID 50. Because for these MAFSA applications, the transaction IDs, ICER IDs, however you want to term it, start at 50. So that's how they'll be able to differentiate. Oh, that one is 50. This one is 51. If they make 10 corrections, they'll just keep being numbered upwards to 10, 5, 10, or whatever. So right now, since we haven't processed the ICER by the state, we haven't processed it yet, there's really no way to differentiate. But when you come out of making a correction, the one that you just corrected, it shows open like it's showing here. And so now if you look at the dashboard, I had 2 items before, now I only have 1 because that is outstanding. And then if I click in here, they have these options at the top. So I can show all documents. I can just show items that are satisfied. I can show just items that are needed. It gives you different options. Okay, so let me log out of this student. And now I'm going to create a dependent student. So again, the student clicked on the link on the state site or the school site. They get here and they click sign up. So, okay, go check my email. So now I'm in. So now I'm going to complete this one as a dependent student. I'm single. I'm going to put 1,000. So if you notice right away over here, it has dependency determination. It has that section because it's going to ask the student, are you an emancipated minor? Are you homeless? All of that stuff to make a determination. Say, I don't have a license. I don't have that. Freshman, bachelor's, don't have a bachelor's. Okay, so it's asking me, do I have children? I do not. Do I have dependents other than children or spouse? I do not. Am I active duty military? I'm not. Am I a veteran? No. Are both your parents deceased or are you in foster care or ward of the court? No. Were you an emancipated minor? No. Are you in a legal guardianship situation? No. Was I unaccompanied youth or homeless? No. Was I in a shelter or a transitional housing program? No. Unaccompanied youth again? Nope. So now it's telling me I have to select one of these. My application requires parent information. I can select that, or I can say, I'm unable to provide parent information due to special circumstances. And so I'm going to do this. If they select that one, we're directing them to the financial aid office, because if they can't provide parental information and they answer those questions all no, then they need further assistance because they can't fill out this form fully. So, okay. So now I'm in the family parent information. So what's my parents' marital status? I'll say never married. 3 is fine. 1 in college. Parent social security number. If their parent doesn't have one, you put in all zeros. Okay. Let's say will file, head of household, 10, don't know, 45,000, 8,000, 45,000. No, 500. Oh, I rent. Don't have that. Oh, I forgot something. No. Okay. So it wouldn't let me continue because that was a required field. I'm going to say, no, they didn't pay any, but I'll put that they received some. Now I'm on to the student tax return information. Let's say will not file. But I made $500. I have $100 in the bank. Here. So now I'm at the school list with parent. Take that one, the parent. And I'm going to e-sign, so I have to download, go back. Click next, type in my name. Okay, so now you see that it says request parent signature. So it knows the student is dependent and a parent signature is required. So as the student, if I click review and update, there's this option to request parent signature. And when I click on it, it brings up this box. When I select that parent, that's the email that I put into the application, and then I would click send invitation. Right now, we are working out an issue with sending emails out to parents. So I can't really demo that entire process at this time, but just understand that the parent will get an email requesting their signature, and then they'll click on a link to go in and create their own personal portal account. And then they'll gain access to the application just like it looks here. And they can go into the application. They can make updates if they need to. And then at the end, after they go through the application, they'll be prompted to e-sign just like you saw for the student. So any questions on that? Okay, so and let me kind of give you an overview of what happens after the student completes the application. So the data is collected here, and then it is transmitted over to the Regent interface. And at that point, the state, they can run a process and they determine how often they run it that will create the ICER and put it in the system for the schools to see it, for the colleges to see it. So if the student selected 3 different colleges, then 3 separate ICERs will be created, and each one will have the school code relative to that particular institution. And then once that happens, the schools and or the state can then take that information and determine eligibility for either institutional or state aid. And so even with corrections, if a student comes in here and makes a correction, that corrected ICER will not get created until that process runs to create ICERs. And that is pretty much the process from the student's perspective. So let me just ask again, are there any questions on this portal, the application, what it looks like, how to navigate it? Any questions? Okay, who do students contact if they have questions about their application, experiencing difficulty completing the form, tech support, etc.? So on the dashboard, oh, hold on. Okay, is it stalling on me? Come on. Here we go. On the dashboard, we have this blurb up here, and we're going to put in an email and phone number here. And it says there, we're basically letting them know if you're having issues, please reach out. And we'll put an email and a phone number there. Carol, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to elevate something that Mario had brought up regarding basically just making sure that there's a change around the specific information that you're asking regarding the DACA number, even if there's like an explanation. I don't know if there's like still time for that to be added so that there's no confusion around the information that the student needs to put in there. So I just kind of wanted to elevate that point.
Okay.
Carol, point well taken and noted. I can tell you that as recently as this morning, we're sampling the applications that had been submitted. We were noticing quite a few applications that had actual, at least what would look like a social security number. Some we don't believe are, because all social security numbers begin with a number other than 9. We see quite a few of those. But the others that starts with a 7 or a 6, and we have to figure out what those are. And that's what I'll be researching to understand whether the DACA or something else, that some number issued by a federal entity to those students. And go ahead, please.
No, I was just gonna say I'm really happy to, just connect with you offline if you want to. I work for the Office for Refugees and Immigrants, and my supervisor is an immigration lawyer. So if you need some guidance regarding like what is specific the information that you're looking for and how we can guide people to like put in the right information there. I think that that's important, because in that way students, like if the more information that we give the students, the more likely they are to like give the right information there. So I'm super happy to connect with you on that.
Great, thank you. And I was trying to reach out to you for that.
Of course, I'll put my email in the chat. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. But what the other, and I
Mhm.
think Tracy spoke to this, if a student comes in and puts no social security number or social security number equivalent, then the system assigns them a random number, but that will not look like a social security. I believe at least the first 3 to 5 digits are zeros. So we know it's not a social number, right? So we have to really differentiate between what persons may have reported a true social security number versus something else.
Yeah.
I can also tell you that we are planning to do 100% verification of the data, including social security numbers, so we make sure that we're not working with someone who frankly should file a FAFSA and access federal aid. So that work is still unfolding, but I'm happy to speak to you about the nuances in numbers and what we might see on an application.
Yeah. And I think Mario just also added privacy notice for any immigration first of providing USCIS not like or A numbers. And that's also something that I wanted to elevate around. There's some students, and I can speak for experience. I was at some point, even though I was a US citizen, my parents weren't documented when I was filling out my FAFSA when I was a college student. And any information or any reassurance that we can provide to students around how that information is being protected, because also like if parents are putting information, any privacy notice or like how data will be protected, I think would be really helpful as well.
Yeah, and we're mindful of that. And we know that even when we cross over to 24, 25, then even though that application is not being demonstrated today, but we know it will be even further restricted in terms of around information privacy and that sort of thing. But at the current time, there is no plan that I know of, and Glenn can speak to this, to either match the data to any other third-party databases, or even share it. So so there's total privacy. We've even been asked by the institutions in terms of what data they'll be able to see, and that decision too is pending. So we were very mindful of the privacy concerns.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
For the question where at the beginning they have to say whether or not they have a social or their eligibility before they can go and complete the form, where you said if you have a social security number, then you need to complete the FAFSA. Is it possible, at least for the 2024 form, to add the FAFSA link at the bottom underneath the red sentence so that they'll go straight to the FAFSA?
No, it's out the box. So whatever's there is what the student will receive for 23, 24.
No, I was saying for the 24, 25 form.
For 24, 25, I'll see what's there. I haven't really looked into it. Could be different.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, that can also be added as a useful link on the dashboard as part of the next phase of this implementation. Any additional questions? If there are none, I'm going to turn it back over to Robert and Clantha to close us out.
Robert, would you close us out, please? Thank you.
I mean, just as a for your information, as I had mentioned just a moment ago, we are in a process of reviewing the applications that have been submitted. And again, you can imagine it's the first time around for all of us here. We're doing this in a very tight window, and The goal is to, not the goal, but the plan is to actually disperse funds to eligible students in March. So there's a lot of work to be done in between, but we are aware that there are some students that are yet to complete the application or fully completed. It could be someone who went out there and is yet to get beyond the stage of creating a user account, although we think these are in the minority. But the other students who may have yet to sign their application or maybe missing a parent's signature. And Tracy did allude to the fact that we are just about to resolve this issue where parents are not getting this email. That's in the works, and we hope to have that completed perhaps as early as this afternoon or tomorrow. But the plan is to follow up with each person who has completed this application. And eventually we'll get them to a point where it's completed and we can begin to use their data to make available to institutions and begin to determine eligibility for state financial aid. And we hope that our colleagues on campuses will also make their institutional aid available to those students. But it's been a pretty very fast-moving effort, and we continue to thank Regent for collaborating with us to get this application out. And as Clancy mentioned earlier, we will have 24, 25 available, and perhaps we'll take another opportunity to train with you again. The 24, 25 environment, as you know, is a little bit more complex in terms of data students are being asked and privacy issues and things of that nature. So I'm sure we'll get a chance to reconnect on this again. But at least for today, thanks for taking the time and to be here this afternoon. And thank you for your questions as well. I've wrote down a lot of things that I'll go back and because we're still building the specs for this platform that we'll have in production next couple of months. So this was very helpful to hear from you. So Leslie, I don't know if you're there, but Tracy, Clantha, you can bid everyone good afternoon, and we'll talk again.
Great.
All
Thank you,
right.
Robert. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tracy.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Everyone, yep.